Hi, this video is here to help you with completing a symmetric figure. In our last video, Lines of Symmetry, we learnt that when a shape has reflective symmetry, it can be divided into two identical halves, and the two halves are mirror images of each other. We show this line of symmetry with a dashed line. For example, a rectangle is symmetrical because it can be divided into two identical halves by a vertical and horizontal line of symmetry. In this video, we will be completing a symmetrical figure. A symmetrical figure is a shape that looks the same on both sides of a line of symmetry. Symmetrical figures can be found all around us, such as when flowers have symmetrical petals or the symmetrical parts of a leaf. To complete a symmetrical figure, we need to draw the missing half of the shape on the other side of the line of symmetry, making sure that the shape is exactly the same on both sides of the line. When completing a symmetrical figure presented on a squared grid like this, we can use the grid to help us. Firstly, we locate the line of symmetry. There is a vertical line of symmetry here. Remember, this line acts as a mirror line, and we need to make sure the images either side of the line are mirror images of each other. To do this, we can start by looking at this shaded square. You can see that it's exactly one square away from the mirror line. This means that the reflection of this square must also be exactly one square away, and we can draw it here. The next shaded square is two squares away from the mirror line, so the reflection must also be two squares away. The next shaded square is three squares away from the mirror line, so the reflection must also be three squares away. If we repeat this method with the final two squares, we can check how far each square is away from the mirror line and use that to help us shade in the remaining squares needed so that we have made a true reflection of this shape. Let's look at another example. How could we complete this pattern so that it's symmetrical? Firstly, what do you notice is different from the last example? Well, this pattern has a horizontal mirror line, and the line is not in the centre of the grid. This time there are also squares shaded in on both sides of the mirror line. However, we can still use the same method to complete the pattern. Firstly, how far are these two squares away from the mirror line? They're both two squares away from the mirror line, so the reflection of both squares must also be two squares away. The next two squares are only one square away from the mirror line, so their reflections must also be only one square away. This square is directly on the mirror line, so its reflection will always be positioned on the mirror line. And the final square is directly above the square we've just reflected, one square away from the mirror line, so we can simply draw the reflected square here. We've now completed our symmetrical pattern. Take a look at these patterns that Abby has been making. Can you use the strategy that you've learned to help you decide which patterns are symmetrical? Pause here while you decide. Only this pattern was symmetrical. Did you identify the correct pattern? Now let's have a look at how to complete shapes according to a line of symmetry. We need to complete this shape by reflecting it in the mirror line. We can use a similar strategy to complete the shape as we used to complete the patterns of shaded squares. Firstly, can you see any of the vertices on the incomplete shape? There's a vertex here and here. I can see that this vertex is two squares away from the mirror line, so the reflective vertex needs to be two squares away as well. And now I can join the line of the shape from the mirror line to my reflective vertex, like this. Next, I can see that this reflective vertex will also be two squares away from the mirror line here. I can now draw a line between each vertex, including the new vertex formed at the mirror line. What shape have we formed? It has 6 sides, so it's a hexagon. If asked to complete this shape by reflecting it in the diagonal mirror line shown, can we use the same method we used to complete the previous shape? Firstly, can you see any of the vertices of the incomplete shape? There's a vertex here, here, and here. I can see that this vertex is 2 squares away from the mirror line, so the reflective vertex needs to be 2 squares away as well. And now I can join the line of the shape from the mirror line to my reflective vertex, like this. The next reflective vertex is 1 square away from the mirror line, so the reflective vertex needs to be 1 square away as well. And now I can join the line of the shape from the last reflective vertex to the next reflective vertex. The last reflective vertex is not a whole number of squares away from the mirror line. Can you work out how far away this vertex is from the mirror line? The last vertex is 1.5 squares away from the mirror line, so the reflective vertex will also be 1.5 squares away from the mirror line. I can now draw a line between each vertex, including the new vertex formed at the mirror line. What shape have we formed? It has 8 sides, so it's an octagon. Now it's your turn. If possible, use some square paper to copy and complete the symmetrical figures shown. Remember, if you need any help, then you can always rewind the video and look at the previous examples. How did you do? Here are the answers. Now let's try a challenge. Felix completes this symmetrical figure so that it's reflected in both horizontal and vertical mirror lines. Look at Felix's completed work. Can you spot any mistakes that he's made and explain how he could correct them? Firstly, if we look at the orange squares, we can see that this square is in the wrong position to be a reflection of this square in the vertical mirror line. It should be 2 squares away from the vertical mirror line. And it's also in the wrong position to be a reflection of this correctly reflected square in the horizontal mirror line. If we move the reflected square here, the orange squares are now reflected correctly in both mirror lines. If we now look at the red squares, we can see that this red square is too far away from the horizontal mirror line to make a true reflection of the original pattern of red squares. And it's now also in the incorrect position to be a reflection of this correctly reflected red square in the vertical mirror line. If we move the red square here, the whole diagram is now reflected correctly in both mirror lines. I hope this video has helped you with completing a symmetric figure. If you're looking for more maths help, then take a look at the Twinkl website where we've got lots more videos just like this one.